Today, I want to give you 6 reasons why we should not be complaining about the Resident Evil 2 remake. And I'm doing air quotes around remake, but I'll get into why later. Now, if you have your little nitpicks of the game or some things you didn't like when you saw it, that's understandable because not everyone is going to like everything. Like, in my personal opinion, I don't like how they display the objective in the top left corner. But I'll hold my final decisions on if that's bad or not until I play the full game, because you never know, the police station might be enormous and you actually need it to tell you where to go. So let's go ahead and get into the reasons, starting with number 1. Okay, now my first reason is kind of like a joint reason. It's not really just one single reason, but it's that it's a brand new experience and you've never played this before. It's not the guy in the demo reveal when they were playing it, he said it's not necessarily a remake, it's a brand new game. And I'm quoting him verbatim here, but he basically said it's a brand new game with a Resident Evil 2 theme to it. So for you to off bat just judge the game and say, oh, it's not the classic Resident Evil 2, I really want my classic Resident Evil 2, you gotta understand that this is not just a remake of Resident Evil 2. This is a new game they're trying to make, essentially, with a Resident Evil 2 theme to it. So for you to prejudge it beforehand, you're gonna be one of those people who give the game a 0 stars before it even comes out, and your opinions don't matter. So moving on to reason number 2. Now, if you've seen my original video on the Resident Evil 2 leaks, you will know that I said something along the lines of there are 3 outcomes for this game. It's either going to be too easy because of the over-the-shoulder camera, it's going to be boring because of the over-the-shoulder camera, or they're going to introduce a lot of new enemy types to make the over-the-shoulder camera combat a little harder. So my second reason is that the gameplay actually is difficult. The guy in the demo reveal said if you try to maneuver around zombies and you don't have the room to do so, you're probably gonna die. And that's beautiful. Like, I have no complaints about that, because horror games are the best when they're hard. A game like The Evil Within, think whatever you will about it. The first one, not the second one. The first one, that game was hard as shit, and I loved every second of it because it keeps the games tense. It keeps you on your toes at all times, and that's what horror should do. Horror should not be something you're just running through as if it's a third-person shooter. I'm looking at you, Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. Moving on to reason number 3, the game actually looks scary, and it's hands down the scariest looking Resident Evil to date, and the last one that made me say that was Resident Evil 7. So that's where I want to applaud Capcom, because they're actually getting back to horror, and it's genuine horror. It's not like, oh, we're just going to make the game have a bunch of jump scares. Like, just the atmosphere of the Resident Evil 2 remake it was scary in its own right. Like, if you go back and play Resident Evil 2, the game's not scary at all. I played this back in 1999, I think, and I was only 4 years old. So it scared the hell out of me back then, I'm not gonna lie about that. I still remember Leon falling on the ground and getting his neck burst open by zombies chewing on him. And I just immediately turned the console off and said I will never play this again. But, by today's standards, those games aren't scary whatsoever. The Resident Evil 2 remake actually looks like one of the most scary games we've had in a minute, since maybe like Outlast. And my fourth point kind of ties in with the last point on classic Resident Evils, and I think we need to get away from this mindset that the camera angles made those games good. Me and my friend had a conversation the other day about this, and what do the camera angles actually do other than make the game harder than it should be? Combat-wise, it makes the game, I don't want to say tedious, but it makes the game a lot harder than it should be. When I was playing Resident Evil 0 over at his house, the part on the train where the dogs bust through the window in the beginning, it's like they got a free hit off on me only because I couldn't see where they were, and they were jumping at me already off screen. So it's like, fixed camera angles, I love that kind of stuff in the old school Resident Evils, Remake even, or Resident Evil 0. But, I think we're in a time where that's just not going to work anymore. It doesn't add to the immersion like it did back in the day when it was kind of fresh to people. So, like I said, I think we just need to get away from that way of thinking where, oh, Resident Evil has to be fixed camera angles, because I mean, just with Resident Evil 7, they showed that it can work in a first-person perspective and still be one of the best Resident Evils to ever come out. You know, I would never say Resident Evil 7 is better than a classic Resident Evil, but it has all the elements of one. You know, Resident Evil 7 is so nostalgic for people that have played all of the classic ones and can just pull out of their memory all the things that are in Resident Evil 7 that they use from the classic ones. So, you know, to put it simply, my fourth reason is just we need to get away from this mindset that classic style Resident Evils or even remakes need to be with fixed camera angles, because it just doesn't work anymore. Reason number 5. Now, this might be a little bit of a controversial point because I was one of the people before the game came out or before the game was revealed. I was one of the people saying, oh, they better have everything from the original in terms of content. Like, you know, Leon AB, Claire AB, Force Survivor, Tofu, you know, the difficulty modes, arrange mode. I was like, they kind of have to have all of this, because if they just reduce it down to one long campaign, you know, I'd kind of be disappointed in that. But during the demo reveal, he did kind of imply, he didn't directly say that both characters will have their own campaigns, but he did say that throughout campaigns that they would cross over at points. So, you know, that kind of makes me think they'll at least have a Leon campaign and a Claire campaign. And during the trailer, we did see Ada. She had on the little trench coat holding the revolver, and that kind of made me hope that maybe they'll have an Ada campaign. Hopefully, maybe we can get a little bit of insight on what Ada was doing during the entire Resident Evil 2, because, you know, you're only with her for maybe 5% of the game. You don't actually know what she was running around doing. Hopefully, we'll get some things with Hunk. Hopefully, we get a little bit of more story. And, you know, I'm going to go ahead and go into my 6th point because it kind of relates to that. We're going to get a lot more of the story to this game, because in the original Resident Evil 2, Leon or Claire, whoever you're playing with, they get there basically after everything has already happened. You know, the only person alive as far as the officers go is Marvin, and he's basically dead when you meet him. You know, there's Annette, but you don't meet her till later. There's the Chief, and you only encounter him once before he dies. Ada, of course, Sherry, and Claire, and Leon. Those are the only 6 characters throughout the entire game that you actually meet. And Ben, I guess, but I don't count him. You know, that was just like a conversation, and then he died the next time you saw him. So number 6 is there's going to be a lot more story to it, and I don't see how you could be upset at that. You know, they're changing so much of the game, but they're changing it for the better in terms of the story. You know, Leon gets there, and it's basically like in the middle of everyone still dying. You're seeing he already saw 2 officers die within the first 5 minutes of the game. And, you know, that was so good to me, because it makes me feel like the game will be a lot more story heavy than the old Resident Evils were. And this last thing isn't really a reason, but I want to speak on the redesign of the characters. Now, if you're one of these people who are complaining about the way Leon and Claire look, I want you to really think about something for a second. Resident Evil 2 came out 20 years ago. Do you really think they have the same art team that they had back then? I'm going to go ahead and answer that for you. No, they don't have the same art team they had back then. You know, it's probably not even half of the same people working on this game. And you should not be trying to force what you want onto them. You know, that's how you make a game worse, because you're basically clashing ideas. You're taking what they want to do and basically saying, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Do what I want. And this is kind of why movies end up being really bad, because they'll have different perspectives when it comes to the writing of it, and the script just kind of falls apart at the end of the day. But back onto the point of Resident Evil 2, like I said, they don't have the same artists. These guys are imagining this game through their own mind. They're not trying to just completely 100% copy Resident Evil 2, the original. Like, would you want the same game? Would you want to purchase this game for $60, then sit down and be able to beat it in like 2 hours? Because that's exactly what would happen if I bought that game and it was exactly like Resident Evil 2. You know, this game is ingrained in my memory. I would sit down and probably be one of the first people in the world to beat it. And, you know, they'll probably give us costumes for the classic looks. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they did that, because if you look at the deluxe version of the game, if you pre-order it, you get the samurai edges from Chris and Jill, and I think Wesker. I can't remember if it said Wesker or not, but with the deluxe edition, you get all those costumes, and you know they gave one of them is called Leon Noir. That makes me think they're going to bring back the suit from Resident Evil 4. You know, if you've ever unlocked the mob suit or whatever, I think that's what that costume is going to be. And then they even went out of their way to give us Elsa from Resident Evil 1.5. That was so fucking great when I saw that. I just lost my shit when I saw that. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to get the deluxe edition because I need that. I need that costume. And you know, I just think it's something so petty to, you know, discredit the game on, because like I said, these are not the same people working on the game, so why would you expect the game to be the same as it was 20 years ago? So yeah, those are my reasons for why we should not be complaining about the Resident Evil 2 remake. Of course, we're gonna have those people that complain about every little thing just because it's not exactly what they wanted, regardless of how good the game actually is. You know, we saw this with Resident Evil 7. For months after the game came out. But that's all I have to say about it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys will subscribe and look out for my next one. I'm gonna try to start uploading more because, you know, it was like 2 weeks that I uploaded my second video after my first one. But yeah, see you guys later.